quick video going over our twist stats for June. There's a lot of stats that I have. There's not a whole lot of depth to them. There's not a whole lot of reasoning to them, honestly. I keep track of my stats for, twist and standard, and the idea behind it is that in standard, we'll have a decent record with some deck lists saved of what was good, what was bad. We can look back at lists and see if X was a problem in this metagame, Y was the solution, here's what kind of cards Y had. Let's look at what we have in our new format and see if we can make kind of an analogous sort of thing there. With Twist being kind of one-off events, I'm not sure what exactly there is to glean from this, but it was fun keeping track of everything. I like numbers, I like stats, and I believe there's still going to be something to be said for discussing them, talking about our reflections on the format on the first month, and just having, a general discussion thread about this first month of a real twist mode. Obviously, we've had previous months of twist, but it was just like older metagames with some switched cards, and they got semi-solved fairly quickly. I believe that something like this obviously takes much more effort to make happen. You have to make a lot of technical, like, design choices and design changes. They probably changed the way that the coin works to give you overflow mana because they knew Marin was coming. They had to obviously make up all the new heroes and all of their concepts. So this was a large undertaking, but I believe it was really well done. They kept up pretty well with health updates and little small patches, trying to keep things decent in lieu of massive changes. And then when they eventually did do deck changes, they brought buffs to a lot of the weaker classes, which really needed it. And so I think overall, the first June season of Whizbang's Heroes was done really, really well. It was a lot of fun. It was a great time. And if we scroll down here, we can see that I ended at Legend 271. And so it's not like I'm just coming at you talking about it from a pretty casual standpoint. I did also try to competitively climb. I tried to figure out what decks were the strongest in the format, what some of the strongest lines were, if you were facing a certain deck a lot, what you wanted to play against them to try and have a better chance, stuff like that. Just thinking a little bit, more analytically, a little bit more in-depth than your average casual player is probably going to. And I believe that, just us going through these stats and talking about it will hopefully push all of us to think a little bit harder, to understand what's going on, to just have a better understanding of the design and a lot of the choices and the balance that goes into something like this. So, starting off, just wanted to show real quick, I didn't play too many games once I hit Legend this month. I hit it pretty late into the month. I hit it on the 27th, right as the deck changes happened. So it was looking pretty close. I might not have made it this month. I was playing a lot of Kael'thas, which was a very fun deck and was still competitively viable, but has obviously a lot of randomness to it. And so I was going to have to grind a lot of games if I really wanted to make it, until I played Zul'jin on the day of the patch, and the deck just felt really strong. It was pretty consistent. It could have been that strong the entire time, and I just wasn't aware. But it definitely got some improvements with the deck changes, and getting on that super quick as soon as they came out helped propel me to Legend fairly quickly. So once in Legend, I played a couple more games as Zul'jin, went 5-3, and I played one game as King Crush because someone had played the new King Crush deck versus me, and it looked a lot better than the original version, but alas, we did not make it. So in Legend, we had 9 total games. But moving on to what's actually interesting is the entire month worth of stats. So this shows what I played, how many matches, our wins and loss, and versus what class, as well as our total win rate for the entire month, which was 57%. We went 89-67. Oh, hi, kitty cat. You come and say hi. And our most played classes in order were Kael'thas, Zul'jin, N'Zoth, and Arthas. A majority of our Arthas matches came from the very first day, release day of the set, when Arthas was absolutely busted, and we can see that aligned in the stats here. This was originally 11. We added this one here because we misspelled Arthas. So 7-5. We did have a positive win rate with Arthas. and a majority of those matches would have been on that first day when his deck was even more absurd than it ended up being because he had so much more health. Uh, Once we learned that he was going to be pretty much S tier or seemingly S tier because everyone on Reddit's complaining about it, and as much as I like to complain that the Reddit doesn't know what they're talking about, Arthas was definitely a little bit overtuned at first. So with that information, it wasn't like Arthas wasn't fun to play, and it's not like a big moral thing to be like, oh, I didn't want to play the deck that was the strongest deck. But once we knew that he was going to be strong, I just didn't have any interest in playing more of him. There were going to be plenty of people playing a lot of Arthas. There's going to be plenty of threads asking questions or complaining about it. We didn't need more people playing Arthas. So I decided to take a different route and just make sure to try the other classes out. And instead, we learned that we really liked some of the more fringe ones. We played a decent amount of games as Bran. I honestly thought it was going to be more than just this. But I might be getting confused with the beginning of this new season. I played a decent amount of the new Bran as well, so might be getting a little bit muddled in my mind. The original Bran list was not particularly strong, but it has a lot of the same allure that the Kael'thas deck does, where you're a semi-consistent deck because obviously you know what you start with, but your every single game is going to be different because there's so much random stuff going on. And you can love or hate that. Hearthstone has always battled with whether or not that's a good or bad thing and how much generation and how much random is fine. But especially in a mode that is supposed to be flashy and just more fun and chaotic, that's totally fine. It's like exactly up the alley of what they should have been doing. So, had a lot of fun with Bran. He was kind of mediocre. We had a couple, little games with a bunch of the classes that we didn't really find particularly interesting. Original Guff was really bad. Forced Domu was actually pretty solid. I just didn't stick to him for whatever reason. His deck had a couple duds, which we talk about in the deck changes video, but overall he was fine, and his passive's really good. So going into the July season, I could see him maybe being a contender. And this one surprised me a lot, actually. So I only played 3 games of Illidan the entire month, but I feel like I know exactly how Illidan functions very well, and that's because, as you'll see in our matchup data here in a second, we faced Illidan a ton. Illidan, especially near the end of the month, seemed to become the most consistent option for people. There was a lot of Alakir, there was a lot of Illidan, and both of those decks are very pointed, if that makes sense. They start with a game plan, you know the game plan from the beginning, and you have a little bit of flexibility because you never know exactly how your game's going to go or how your draws are going to be, but for the most part you had I start at A, my plan is to get to B, and all I'm doing is getting to B as fast as I can. With the Illidan deck, obviously that's getting to Jace, and it was just really consistent. It felt pretty good. Having lifesteal was insane, and especially because I played a lot of Kael'thas, there was a lot of times where I thought I was going to have enough burn damage, and then the consistent lifesteal from Illidan was a real issue. So Illidan seemed particularly strong, especially near the end of the season, and I had a little bit of success with him. Getting into the first massive section, we have Kael'thas. So I played 53 games of Kael'thas and went 31-22. He was a ton of fun. His deck is not the most consistent, but it's not terribly inconsistent. You have so much generation, and your hero power is just nutty, man. Like, it is so much fun. If you have not played Twist or Kael'thas or anything, if you don't have any interest in this format at all, for a month, dude, go and craft Kael'thas and just spam games at Kael'thas. It is probably the most fun experience I've had in Hearthstone in a long time. It's absolute chaos. It's great. And it's semi-viable because we went pretty positive, and a majority of our climb until we hit Zul'jin on that last day from like Diamond 3 or 2 up to Legend, it was all Kael'thas, baby. A couple games with King Crush. Original King Crush sucked. Leroy I didn't find any interest in. N'Zoth, very late addition for me. I did not try him very often at all. And then during my like Zul'jin climb, I faced a decent amount of him, and so I was like, maybe I should give him a little bit of more love. And especially with the buffs slash changes that he got with the July update, I think Nuzlocke's going to be a very prime contender going into July. I did not realize his potential, and did not jam enough games with him last month. But he was pretty strong, had a lot of consistent early game. His passive is incredible, and there were a lot of board states where you could very easily manipulate what your hero power is summoning, and there were just times where you never wanted to play another minion because all you wanted every turn was to get a 1/1 copy of whatever you had just played. And it just came together. It meshed really well. Very fun deck. Couple one-offs here, nothing to really talk about. Then we get to our boy Zul'jin, our MVP of the month. 24-7 with him. Absolutely popped off. He was good before the deck changes. He was even better after the deck changes. And going into the new month, he hopefully can keep up. There's a lot more kind of aggressive options now, and that's a little bit spooky. Not sure how he's going to fare versus it. He wants to be the aggressor for sure. And you're playing cards and getting board presence whenever you're doing secrets, so like you're getting 2-for-1s a lot. That's really good, but I'm just a little bit worried with the added amount of aggressive options that he might just fall behind a little bit. But he was super good in this month, and he was pretty sleeper, honestly. I didn't face him almost ever. It's like nobody knew that he was good, so maybe I'm underestimating him again. A lot of fun, though. Zul'jin, a lot of fun. Ended up going 89-67 with a 57% win rate the entire month in Twist. Not sure if I'd already mentioned that, but a good note to end on as we move on to the matchup data. This is going to show what we faced off against the most with all classes. So this is what our opponent played, essentially. The most common was Kael'thas. I think everybody realized that he was not only good, but extremely fun and extremely varied. He was great. We ended up having a positive win rate versus him, I think mostly because we understood that in the mirror, you wanted an extreme tempo early, and you could burn down people a lot faster than they thought. So if you were the first one to start slinging burn spells at the face, you had a good chance of winning. I'm not sure if people were aware of that, or if they were just trying, I think everyone was playing a little bit greedy with this deck just because you could get away with it, and the way to win the mirror was to not play greedy. So just jam face, be efficient, get them to 0. Faced Arthas a ton. Obviously, he was the best deck in format for quite a while, so it does not surprise me at all that he shows up here. We had a fairly decent, competitive win rate versus him. Most of the time, you're expecting to be at about 50-50, considering that he was supposedly so good and, overpowered. Maybe you expect even something like a 45. I very rarely felt that Arthas games were actually that broken. Occasionally they had 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop of all 3 of the runes that they needed. Those kinds of games, yeah, man, you're probably going to lose that, and it's not going to feel very good. But as long as they didn't have the God curve, Arthas felt just like a strong, powerful deck. It felt, the idea is that all these characters feel kind of like solo bosses. You want them to have big effects that feel like they should never have been in multiplayer, and Arthas 100% felt like that. They nailed his flavor. They nailed how good it felt to play him. I don't know. He ended up in a pretty good spot. I never felt particularly afraid of him. He was just a good opponent. I think that it was a little bit overhyped how broken he was. Obviously, the health adjustments did help rein him in a little bit, but I don't know. He didn't seem as insane as everyone made him out to be. I think people were overreacting just a little. Then we had Alec here. He was very consistent in high diamond and lower, as I was getting my climb to legend. Honestly, it was just that sometimes Therazane would high roll games, and Alec here being worth 12 damage rather than 6 damage, and then sometimes being buffed by Therazane. So you could go a Therazane buffed Alec here into the deal 6 from your hero power, and essentially one-shot most people from any position, because at that point in the game you've had to have done some damage. You're a tempo deck. It was just strong. It was decently fast. It had a lot of late game, and its stats never really disappeared. So it was just a good mid-range deck and very popular. we ended up, doing pretty well against it just because there's so many healing tools and removal tools and freeze and just random stuff that you generate, and that's good versus very consistent decks because sometimes they only have so much of a ceiling. There's only so much they can do, and people only play around expecting to have to do so much. Like a lot of people with this deck, I would notice, would kind of go all in a little too early, and if you could beat their one big turn, then they're just going to concede out essentially. So that is a little bit of a weird observation, but it happened a lot in my games where like people would go, they'd get to like turn 6 and just fizzle out, and it's like, dude, your deck should not be fizzling out this early. Like you're obviously doing something wrong. Then we faced Illidan quite a bit. Like I said when we were reviewing my stats with him, I feel like I know exactly how this deck plays. It feels very fun. Like I had a good time playing it. I played against it so often that like you learn really quickly what you're trying to play around and how the mana costs reduction actually all figures out. There's a lot of spells in that deck you can kind of play around and kind of can't, but what really it came down to is the deck had a lot of healing, and so we couldn't always get there. That contributed to a lot of our losses, and it has inevitability. The Jace, especially when I'm playing something as slow as Kael'thas can be, it just gets there. Sometimes they outstall you, and that's all it is. The Lich King came in really high, actually. I think he's going to be the last one that I'm going to specifically talk about, and I never found his deck to be like particularly insane. He was fun. He was kind of cool. You could obviously get like a big corpse farm early. You could go like crop rotation on 3 into corpse farm plus getting the token from the corpse farm. Like there were some cool interactions, and it was one of the only decks that was not a Highlander deck to start the season, which might contribute to its consistency, ideally. And so maybe that was a little bit of a lure for people to play it, but most games versus it just felt like it fizzled out. Like it has a cool effect, but I'm playing a deck that has access to a lot of freeze, and I can normally just end up burning them out without having to interact with their board. If there's more decks that are super board based, obviously having your large tokens are going to be more worthwhile, but I don't see that being particularly important. And so I was surprised to see Lich King as often as I did. I didn't play him nearly as much as everyone else did, and I have yet to see him in the July season, so I think that he is just going to fade to irrelevancy. So at least he got a little bit of a spot in the sunshine, I guess. Spot in the limelight. But yeah, that's basically it. I'm not sure, like I said, too much to be gleaned from these stats, but if there's anything else that you guys are interested in, if there's anything you feel like I didn't cover that you would like to be seen in these style of videos, please let me know. And remember to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next video.